We'd like to invite you to visit freekeen.com. Freekeen.com features audio, video, and blogs chronicling the transition to a voluntary society. Freekeen.com also has comments and discussion forums so you can be heard. Freekeen.com.
I should be in Keene, New Hampshire with the Free Staters.
All right, we're going to get started. We'll just loop Derek in when he gets up here. We're doing the Civil Disobedience panel. My name's Ian Freeman. I host a radio show called Free Talk Live. I moved to Keene, New Hampshire because Lauren Canario here was one of the early movers to the area and a real inspiration to me when she was moving up here. Actually, before she came to New Hampshire, she made a pit stop for a little while in New London, Connecticut. Now, maybe some of you heard about the Kelo decision. It's a Supreme Court decision that basically decided that the government people can take private property and give that private property to another private owner. Yeah, it was pretty bad. It was pretty bad. So Lauren actually went there before she came to New Hampshire and made a splash by doing some civil disobedience there and occupying one of the properties and getting herself arrested a couple times. And I heard about that and I thought, wow, this lady is incredible, and definitely kept an eye on her and kept talking about her on Free Talk Live. And then she did some other great civil disobedience in the Keene area, and I just thought, gosh, I got to be there to talk about this. I want to be there to see this happen and to be a part of it and report about it on my show. So that's why I moved to Keene, and it's been great. I mean, I've been around a bunch of really brave people who are willing to put their freedom on the line for everybody else's freedom. I think it's a wonderful thing, and it does have a little bit of risk associated with it. In fact, the number one factor that I use to choose our panelists today is who in the Free State Project has been in jail the longest. Well, as far as I know, it's the people that are on this panel today. So let's just go down the panel, and I guess everybody kind of introduce yourself, maybe answer to start, and of course I want to take a lot of questions today because I think that's really a useful way to do these things. But just to get started, maybe introduce yourself. Why did you move to New Hampshire in the first place, and what got you interested in doing civil disobedience? We'll start with Adamo Freeman.
Thanks. What got me interested in civil disobedience? I think I got involved in it by default, like having been a victim of the war on drugs and realizing like the harms that are associated with that as opposed to being like not a criminal but a victim. And so that's what got me started. And as far as like other civil disobedience I've done it because I just felt it's what's right. It's what I felt was the right thing to do at that moment, whether that's filming a cop or trying to highlight an incidence of, government abuse to whatever degree. On the other question, I moved to New Hampshire, I don't know when officially was. I've been coming here since 2009. I've pretty much had full-time residence here since mid-2010. I spent time in Manchester, Keene, and currently Laconia. All those places, New Hampshire in general, the Shire, I find, like Ian had mentioned, comfort and inspiration in being around others who are willing to put, their personal, lives or livelihood on the line to, express and get more freedoms. So that's why I'm here.
This is Lauren Canario.
Hi, Lauren here. I got interested in civil disobedience when I heard about the Free State Project. This was back in about 2005. At that time, there was a guy named Mike Fisher here, and he was the outlaw manicurist. He went to the grounds of the head of the cosmetology department here in New Hampshire, and he gave someone a manicure. It was illegal. They arrested him. It was made in the news, like every place. There was even, the local New Hampshire cartoonist guy made a cartoon about him, and I thought, wow. That is really something. I wanted to meet him. So I came to New Hampshire. I was a member. I was signed up with the Free State Project since before they voted. I didn't like New Hampshire from Free State, but I'm going, oh, well, if that's where they're going, I'm going. And PorcFest 2005, I walked around the campground, had postcards, and I said, hey, you know those people in Connecticut that are getting their houses taken with the Supreme Court had voted against them? Let's send them like a little, happy message. And I gave it to all the campers who wanted, and we sent it to them. And then I go, man, that Connecticut place is close to New Hampshire. I could go over there and I could hang out with the Free Staters, I bet, and still protest at the eminent domain thing in Connecticut. So that's how I moved to the East Coast. I was all West Coast before that.
We also have Jim Johnson. He is Lauren's husband and himself has been put in jail a few times, at least once.
Hi, I'm Jim Johnson. I moved here because we blame Lauren. And I had a really great job in Las Vegas. And I had a home there, and I had a really great swimming pool. And Lauren decided she would come east here and fight the eminent domain, which is something I was really upset about, that Supreme Court decision. And after moving out here, when I initially signed up for the Free State Project, I figured I'd come to New Hampshire, I would vote, and that's how I would make my difference. And just going through time, nothing else seemed to work. I ended up being put in jail for standing on the lawn of the local correctional facility. And the judge put me in jail, said I had to sign a piece of paper, and I was there for 22 days before I realized I was going to be there the rest of my life. And I don't know. That's when I actually became an anarchist. I have no belief that government will ever be fixed. So that's why I'm here, and that's why I'm on the panel.
Derek J. Horton is with us today, also the star of Derek J's Victimless Crime Spree, which I'd like to remind you is going to be screened on Saturday, right after the group picture. So when everybody's out here for the group picture, you just go up into the media room, and Derek will be hosting a screening of the film, which will show you a lot of the civil disobedience he's done. Derek, you just walked in. The question to start was something like, who are you? Why how'd you find out about the Free State Project? What brought you here?
Cool. So hi, my name is Derek Joseph Horton. I do a podcast called Peace News Now. And I got to New Hampshire in April of 2011, having moved from Philadelphia. I was working at Greenpeace and the ACLU. I was involved in social causes and wasn't seeing any of those work. And that was really frustrating. So I wanted to find a new solution. I was seeing videos of people on YouTube, of people in New Hampshire who were just disobeying bad laws, and that really spoke to me. It seemed like that was a one way that I could participate in clogging up the gears of the system that were hurting so many people. So that's why I did move to New Hampshire and join this motley crew, and did some civil disobedience, like filming in City Hall, and was arrested for things like that. Ended up spending some time in jail, and that's it. Now I'm looking to live a more freer life, having learned those things.
What was, just a quick answer from everybody down the line, what was the most time you spent in jail in an uninterrupted stint? Ademo?
Mine was probably the most recent, for the 92 days, which was on 2 combined charges, though. One was for chalking the Manchester police station. I did 60 days for that, and then I did 32 days for wiretapping, and those are with my good time, so it should have been 90 and 60, and so that's my longest stay. I have a 16-day and a couple hours, and a couple days where I was arrested for filming Judge Burke and Keene, but yeah, 92 days.
I did, I think we're tied. I think I did 90 days in Connecticut for reading a book on the porch of a house that was trying to get boarded up when I refused to move.
21 days for me. The first 48 hours or 36 hours was in solitary confinement without anything to read, without anything to do. It was really cold. And then I spent another 2 weeks in solitary confinement for not signing the piece of paper. So 21 days on a stint.
50 days.
And I did 58 days as well for standing in front of a police car when they were arresting a friend of mine for having an open container in the park, Central Square, Keene, New Hampshire. So what's the point of this, guys? I mean, I know there are a lot of critics out there, people who look at civil disobedience and say, you know, aren't you guys just sitting in jail for nothing? What's the point of doing this?
Well, for me, the point is educational, and so in like 2 degrees, I guess, I try to show people the educational side as like what the system is, the gun in the room, and who is willing to use force. You know, a number of officers that have arrested me, I say, you're arresting me for filming this person or trying to stop this interaction, and yet I haven't like harmed or physically touched anybody, and that's what you're doing to me, you know, like, and then caged or solitary confinement like Jim had mentioned. And so for me, it's to educate and show folks that, and then 2 is to inspire, hopefully, others to do it because, you know, like Jim, I am the same way. I don't have any faith in the system, whether it's the courtroom, the police, whatever. If it's involved with the government, it's not going to work and it's not doing it right. And so to me, it's about numbers, which Ian often talks about on his radio show. And so I'm trying to inspire people to A, be active, or B, be aware. So that's what it's about for me.
Well, for me, it's not numbers or education. It's like an emotional thing that there's an injustice happening and you can't stand it anymore, and like you just can't go along with it anymore. So that's when I get arrested.
Usually when I get arrested, it's because something is happening right at the moment that I feel I can't put up with. And the same with not signing the piece of paper in front of the judge. It's usually that moment that I can't let pass, and that's what happens to me.
Yeah, but very much similar. I think I would agree, and I think we'd all agree with Martin Luther King, who said that non-cooperation with evil is as much a necessity as cooperation with good. And so when you're faced with that choice of am I going to comply with this evil and continue it and perpetuate it, hopefully the answer can be no.
I'm glad you brought up that term, non-cooperation, Derek, because I think it's the counterpart to this discussion, or the corollary. Of course, the idea of civil disobedience seems to be that you announce something in advance, that it is publicized. You know, one of the classic examples was Andrew Carroll, an early mover for the Free State Project, made a public event, basically, made it known. He was going to go to Keene's Railroad Square and hold a piece of marijuana out in his hand. So the police knew fully well what his intentions were, and they had to choose how to respond, rather than maybe stumbling across something and then, like they did with the lady in the park with the open container. So do you feel like there is a difference between civil disobedience and non-cooperation? Is it a real subtle difference between the two?
Yeah, for me, I would say that most of us up here, except for maybe Derek during the incident in Central Square, I don't think any of us really had planned, or maybe when you were sitting on the porch in Connecticut. But for myself, none of my civil disobedience was like, I'm going here today and I'm going to be arrested. It's more like Jim had described, where I'm out covering an ordeal or an event, and at that moment, some state bureaucrat is trying to tell me that, you can't film here, or you need to back up, or more distance, and they give me an ultimatum, and that it's so ridiculous, or it's such a violation of my rights, or what I feel is right, and that I can't comply. And so I guess that's the subtle difference to me, is that one is like, in a circumstance that arises in which you feel you can't give into that situation. For me, like plea deals, or it's like I plan this, I want to make a point, I'm willing to go to jail, because like I am willing to go to jail for like filming police and stuff like that, but every time I filmed the police, I wasn't intending to go to jail. Like, I don't think you should go to jail, and so I wasn't going like, hey, here's a press release, I'll be on downtown Manchester filming the cops and I plan to go to jail. It's just like, while filming the cops, the cop tells me to move or leave. It's an arbitrary line. Back up. Well, how many feet? As many as I say. Well, I don't know what that means. I don't know what you're doing. And so then it's non-cooperation as opposed to civil disobedience, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's a good point. The difference between civil disobedience and just non-cooperation. I don't know if the Bad Quaker's here. Bad Quaker. He's got a recent podcast about the difference. He calls it all civil disobedience, and he calls it a ritual, and that you're trying to reform the system, in a different way, but you still believe in the system. And I'm saying, yeah, there is that. There's the ritual kind where you say, this law is unjust, and and you get arrested on purpose.
Like the outlaw manicurist you mentioned before.
Like Andrew Carroll. But there's also the non-cooperation, which I think is not actually trying to reform anything or not trying to change laws. It's not trying to get any attention, although it does. And it's just saying, no, this is wrong. You can't do this. Yeah.
Yeah, if you're going to plan an event and have people arrested, you still have faith in the system, right? If you're going to just not go along with their laws, you don't expect any change in their laws.
Just to briefly repeat what's really mostly been said is that I don't have any faith myself in going through the court system, so I'm avoiding arrests at all costs. That's not the point I want to try and make. I want to avoid being arrested. I want to avoid being arrested.
For me, the dividing line between the two is, what is happening as far as civil disobedience usually is planned in advance. But I can think the incident where I stood in front of a police car. I had planned to do that in advance, but I hadn't announced my plans in advance. It was something that came up in the moment. I found out Heike was being arrested in the park. I responded immediately to it, and I stood in front of the police car and encouraged others to do that. I think that was an instance of civil disobedience. I tend to think of non-cooperation as when the state's coming after you and you say, no, I'm not going to do what you say. I'm not going to pay the money you want me to pay. I'm not going to jump through these hoops. When you're non-cooperating with their demands, it's non-cooperation. And sometimes civil disobedience is, usually not cooperation. So it's kind of a subtle distinction. One of the big questions I know I got while I was in jail was it worth it? I mean, there you are, you're in jail, it's 90 days, several weeks, well over a month, almost 2 months. You're there in jail, and some jails, of course, are worse than others, and maybe we can touch on that here in a little bit. But was it worth it was a big question I got. And I don't know if I want you to answer the question for all of the civil disobedience. Maybe you think some of it was or some of it wasn't. So what do you think? I mean, was it worth it? Ademo.
Well, I mean, I definitely think it was worth it. I get letters or walking around here at PorcFest and people say, oh, you inspired me, or I seen that, and that's why I'm here, or that's why I did this, or that's why I'm involved in that. And so it's something worth it. If the question is would I do it again, I absolutely would, because like I said before, at those moments I still feel that I was doing what was right. And so I don't mind that. But I would guess I'd just answer the question for folks who are considering it, is that know what is involved. I know that some folks may move up here and I want to get involved and do that, but know that the punishments or the jails, the guards, the loss of freedom, like Jim had mentioned how cold it is in the jails, or strip searches, these things are all real. These things all will happen to you if you want to take it. And so it's still worth it to me, but I know that it's affected my life being in those situations, to be caged in a room like an animal. And so still worth it, but just know that what the reality is of it.
Yeah, we did a test with people. They asked for volunteers, and they shocked them at different levels, and they gave them a questionnaire that said, why did you do this? And what the answers were on a lark. It was just, for fun. Or down to the most serious one was I am helping the progress of human science and coming up with great answers for the scientists. And it seemed like if they gave you a light shock, they'd say, oh, it was just for fun. And if they give you a heavy shock, you'd answer, oh, it was for the greatness of the civilization. So it's a weird psychological thing that if you go through something bad, you'll always think it's worth it, which I think I have experienced. Because, I think it's worth it, but I didn't know it beforehand. But that I did it and went through it. It was horrible. It was nasty, humiliating stuff. But hey, when you get out, you can tell people about it, and there's a lot of good lights to it, even though it was horrible and maybe it wasn't worth it. But we just think it is.
I don't know. When I told the cop that I wasn't gonna let him see my ID, and I got away with that, that seemed to be well worth it. got a lot of hits on YouTube. Spending time in jail, when you're there, it's certainly not worth it. People talk to you about what you did afterwards. I wore a blue robe and a headband to all my court appearances, and the judge couldn't say anything about that, even though I was dissing his court. Some things are well worth it. I don't know, but you go through a really huge range of emotions when you're sitting in jail, from wow, I am so stupid, to geez, I hope I'm here forever, because it really costs the state a whole bunch of money.
One of the things that made my civil disobedience worth it to me was that it was on camera. I probably wouldn't have put up any of the fight or resistance that I did if I knew I wasn't filming, because there would be no record of it and I would probably get beaten. So that made it satisfying that there was an objective record that can be shared with others and hopefully inspire others to resist. And then the second part of what made it satisfying is just internally seeing this other part of the government that's shielded from us. A lot of people don't get to experience what happens inside the corrections facilities, what the state wants to do to people who disobey them. You don't get to see that unless you go into it. So that was a deeply satisfying part.
As I mentioned earlier, Lauren was one of my inspirations to do civil disobedience. Also, Russell and Kat Canning, two of the earliest movers. Dave Ridley also, I think, did some, the earliest movers here to New Hampshire as part of the Free State Project, who were putting their own freedom on the line, was a real inspiration for me. I wish I could say, Gandhi and all that, but I learned about Gandhi through learning about Lauren. So what were your inspirations? What humans, what did they do or say that maybe led you down this road in the first place? Because I don't think most of us were, raised with the idea of doing civil disobedience. Maybe you were, but I know I wasn't. So at some point we had to come to that conclusion of, okay, I'm ready to do this, or I think this is really important. What led you there?
Yeah, I think my path may be a little different from some of the other panelists, because like I had mentioned before, I was a victim of the war on drugs, so I really was already, before being an anarchist or anything, fine with breaking the law or doing civil disobedience without really knowing it's a fact. For me, the inspirations I had were Free Talk Live, Ian, and Lauren as well, Sam Dotson, Meg McLean, that were up here doing stuff early on before I arrived, traveling around with Pete and Jason in the RV, Motorhome Diaries, LibertyOnTour.com. Those were the inspirations that got me here.
Well, I had this strategy when I was 2 years old. See, I would refuse to eat. So I've had the civil disobedience thing. I guess I figured it out when I was very, very small. But then anyway, after when I grew up and I saw the people in the Free State Project doing IRS protests and everything, and they had picked up this Michael Fisher, the guy who I heard was inspired by, who did the outlaw manicuring. When I saw him do that, I'm going, that's the kind of stuff I want to do. That's really fun. And it got a lot of press, and I'm going, man, maybe it's horrible to be in jail, but it's effective.
Well, I don't know where I got my sense of holding a line. I observed Lauren when we were in the military, that a captain came up to her. She was a specialist at the time, and Lauren always says yeah to officers, and the officer came up to her and said, Private Canario, does yeah mean yes, sir? And she said yeah. And I dressed down as a specialist in E3. I dressed down on an E7, which is, a staff sergeant, about him being late for our medical helicopter that we used to work on, and I got away with that. It's just always been there, it seems like, for me.
I had some experiences in Philadelphia where I was turned away, told I wasn't allowed to walk down my own street, and that troubled me. And then I was turned away from an Obama rally where the Secret Service was saying I wasn't allowed to bring signs in. And this had happened about in 2011. And these experiences of backing down from the police really hurt my soul and felt like I didn't have autonomy or freedom. And so seeing these YouTube videos of people like Lauren and Jim and Ademo and Ian, quite literally seeing videos of them resisting, was what inspired me to actually go to New Hampshire and get support myself. So I was finally able to get to the point where I could say no and mean no and just stand by that.
You know, for me, whether it was worth it or not is decided in the moment. And you mentioned it was kind of emotional, and I think there's a factor for that for me, and also of publicity and knowing that people are hopefully going to talk about this and education. But when you're told to stop doing something, like stop filming or you fill in the blank, and you back down, like you're saying, it hurt your soul. But when you stand up for what you actually believe in, it's very empowering. And it's, I think, one of the best sensations that you can experience to really be who you truly are and not bow down to the man.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'd like to ask everybody if you ever felt that moment of power when you said no and everybody backed off.
Well, power is such a strange word because we usually associate it with having power over others. But this was totally an internal thing of, you own yourself and you're doing the right thing. So for me, it was in the moment, it's worth it. After the fact, everything else is icing on the cake. All the wonderful people who've said, you inspired me, I moved to New Hampshire because of you and what you did, that is just awesome, and I really appreciate it. All the media coverage that we might get, or very little media coverage in a lot of cases, but whatever we can get, whatever conversations are started, that's all fantastic too. Okay, yeah, you have to deal with court, that's terrible, and jail can be awful as well, but to me that's just, the consequences of the action of doing the right thing. But was it, going back to that question.
Okay, good, yeah. What's the question again?
I don't really know.
Yeah, we're both wandering off. I guess, go ahead.
You feel good about it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. There was one court scene where the trial was just starting. The judge comes in, he says, all rise, and we have a tradition of nobody standing for the judge. And nobody was standing, and the guards in the courtroom were starting to rustle around, and they were yelling at people, and the judge was getting upset. And I turned around to the judge and I said, they don't have to stand for you. It stopped right there, and the judge went on with the trial. Told the guards didn't do anything at that point. To me, that was very empowering. It feels good.
For me, I guess, like in the moment of interacting with the cops, I see all people as the same. We're all equal, and so if it's it's only the ones with badges or this perceived authority that actually give me the issues that we're discussing today. But so I see that mindset, the empowerment, fun, adrenaline rush aspect I get from it is mocking them, because I feel that that's what, especially in the justice system when you're in court and stuff, they're just mocking you rise and jump and do all this stuff and file this paperwork. And so I mock them back. I mean, in my last wiretapping trial, I was quoted saying, let the circus begin, and because that's how I feel about these things. It's like a joke. And so that's where I feel that hey, you guys may have me locked in a cage, but every time you open the door, or every time you give me a chance, I speak whatever I want, I laugh at you, and so that's where I get whatever thrill or ride or empowerment I guess you can get out of it.
Yeah, there's a point that most 99% of people cooperate with the police, and if they get to one of us, somebody who's not gonna cooperate, they really don't know what to do. Once I was at there was a roadblock between the people going to a festival at this Ed Brown's place. He was a tax protester. He wasn't coming to court, and he was staying at home. And then people were going out to give him pizzas and have a music festival and things. The feds, not only the feds, the city, the police, or the city, the state, and the feds had a roadblock. And I'm going, that's not right. And we're just trying to visit our friend. And so I walked through the roadblock, and they arrested me, put me in the jail. Later on that day, they said, okay, you can go now. And And I said, well, I don't think so. And I stayed in the cell. And then they went, but, and then they came in and go, we're going to arrest you for trespassing if you don't get out of this jail cell. And then they were like, oh, I don't know what to do. And they left the door open and left. And so I just keep walking out of the cell, and they were like standing back, and they're going, open the door, to let me out of the jail. So that was pretty cool.
God, I love that story. Derek, any comments on that? Or
Well, it's tough to top that. That's really cool.
Yeah.
But one moment where I felt especially empowered was during the Give Peace a Chance arrest, where I smoked cannabis in the Keene Central Square. And as I was walking away, I was told by an officer to be arrested, and I was singing, and the officer who was told to arrest me folded her arms as if, that's not how you prepare to arrest someone. She was just sort of resigning and not doing it. It was almost like she was engaging in a bit of civil disobedience, that she was just going to disobey this order. Unfortunately, there were other police that assisted in the arrest anyway, but that was one moment where I felt particularly empowered. I was able to stand up and actually just walk away from the place where I was just going to be arrested. That felt empowering.
Yeah, and I think that hopefully, thank you, I think that hopefully some of that can transfer, even though you may not be able to feel it yet, that if you can experience civil disobedience through us and see that it's not so scary, that, here we all are. Our friend Rich Paul, unfortunately, is in jail right now, and I'd like to take a moment to invite all of you. How many are you familiar with Rich Paul? Rich Paul. Okay, so about half the audience. I just want to break down for a moment and talk about Rich. Rich is a friend of ours. He moved as an early mover for the Free State Project several years ago. He had a situation with his ex-girlfriend, or years ago, his girlfriend at the time. She died due to a terrible malady that was something that could have been helped by cannabis. He came around to understand cannabis. He had been kind of a prohibitionist before that, and he began to sell cannabis to people, adults, who were in need of it. He ended up getting set up by the FBI and the Drug Task Force. They arrested him. And what they'd done was they'd already arrested a heroin dealer. And this heroin dealer, they got to roll over on Rich and do some undercover cannabis spies. Rich was arrested for this at one point, charged with 5 felony counts of drug distribution for selling cannabis 4 times and selling something purported to be LSD as well. He went to court. He bravely decided to not take the plea deal. He stood up for what he believed in, and he put his life on the line because he was looking at 100 years in prison for this. And unfortunately, the jury did not decide to nullify in this case, and they found him guilty. The judge, who could have sentenced him to 100 years, did only sentence him, thank goodness, to a year as opposed to any time in prison. He is in jail. He's in the very same jail where the 4 of us have spent an amount of time. You've been there, but the 90 days he did was in Valley Street in Manchester, which is a much, much different place. In Cheshire County, you can go any day of the week, 7 days a week, and visit someone. So what I want to encourage you to do, if you get internet access, go learn a little bit more about Rich Paul. But if you know who he is, even if you've never met him, if you're not running to catch a plane on Sunday, if you're going to be in New Hampshire for a day or 2 or something like that, go down to Cheshire County House of Corrections, 9 a.m. and noon. There's 3 windows. There's 9 to noon, there's 1 to 2:30 in the afternoon, and 6 to 9 at night. And one of the nicest things you can do, besides going to mailtojail.com, if you don't have time to visit him, you can go to mailtojail.com. You can write him a letter. And that's something that I know I really appreciated when I was on the inside. And maybe we can talk about that. But you can write him a letter from mailtojail.com, or better yet, just go down there, physically visit him, and spend a little bit of time with him. Maybe talk to him about his story and your story, and, are you moving to New Hampshire? Because I know that if he was an inspiration to you, he'd really appreciate hearing about that. So Rich Paul, you can go, by the way, to richpaul.freetalklive.com. You can contribute to the fundraiser, which is going to help fund his appeal, which, if it's successful, will hopefully strengthen jury nullification here in New Hampshire, which, if you're not aware, we're the only state, thanks to the efforts of Free State Project legislators like Mike Sylvia, who's in our audience here today. that we can actually talk about jury nullification while we're in a courtroom. So when somebody gets arrested for civil disobedience, we can actually tell the jury about the idea of jury nullification. Now, how successful has that been is another question, but all that aside, we've been going for a good half an hour here, and this is only a 50-minute panel, so I want to make sure that we get questions in. I think we've covered some of the basics, some of the big questions about civil disobedience, and if anything, you feel like there's something y'all want to really add, feel free. But let's open it up to questions from the audience. It could be a question for the whole group to answer. It could be a question for one person in particular about their experience, their civil disobedience. Do we have a microphone down there? Excellent. So just come right on up to the microphone. Don't be shy. You're going to have to come up. I see you raising your hand in the back. Please go ahead and step right up. Come on up to the microphone. That way we can get your voice on
What's the food like in jail?
recording.
What clothes do they give you? How often do they?
This is Daryl Perry, Daryl W. Perry from FPP.cc and a mover to Keene last year. Hey, Daryl.
You guys can answer this any order you want to. What was the absolute worst thing to happen either during or after an arrest for non-cooperation?
I don't know. For me, it's just like the booking everything about jail is like breaking your will or whatever and letting you know who has control in like the first 48 or 72 hours, depending which correctional facility you're in. So that's pretty bad. It's the strip search, the showering in front of them. I have a lot of tattoos, so then they make you stand there naked and they go around and like write down what your tattoos are because they're all gang affiliated in their mind and stuff like that. So for me, that moment where they try to break you, it doesn't really work for my intimidation. Yeah, it's like, well, what they do is they take absolutely everything from you. They try to, like by having you stand there naked, like whatever willpower, whatever, demonizing they can do to you to let you know that they're in control, it's their house, and then they start giving you things like, oh, you can get commissary and you can call your friends and family, as long as you behave, because remember, you'll go back to that hole for 23 hours a day, or 24 if they just forget not to let you out for a day, and no showers, and no mail, and no books, and no blankets, and at one time in Greenfield, Pete and I were left in our underwear in a cell overnight. Like, oh, we're bringing you stuff, so that's how it is.
See, I spent almost 36 hours in a room that was 8 foot by 10 foot with Russell Canning and 2 other guys. And there was no ventilation in the room whatsoever. And the guard would come by and open the door and wave. He'd stand in the door and go, "You guys stink." And
Where was that, Jim? Westmoreland?
That was Westmoreland, yeah. And adjusting to jail in the first 2 or 3 days is really the hard part.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. The first night, in my case, I don't like the cold, and it's really cold in there. And they don't give you any mattress or blanket or anything, so...
It can be really cold or it can be really hot. In the holding cell in Westmoreland, it was sweltering. We had 4 guys in this holding cell. This was the first time I was arrested for not standing up in court or sitting down fast enough, I guess. But there were 4 guys in there. We had 2 guys laying on the floor on mattresses and then 2 up on the actual mattress areas. And, you had to step around everybody. And just that body heat, I think, plus the bubble was probably heated better because that's where all the guards are most of the time.
Just real quickly, the first strip search was probably the most difficult and most humiliating part of the jail experience because I just was not mentally prepared for that. And, a stranger telling you to take off your clothes and show them all parts of your body is just something it's difficult to prepare for.
Yeah, I'd rather be at the Cheshire House of Corrections than being held in like a cell in the basement of the courthouse. Some cells are better than others, and some are just really decrepit and nasty. But these days, when I check in at the Keene Spiritual Retreat, as we call it, that's just kind of how I feel about it. Like, oh, here I am again, just going to take it easy and enjoy the time alone and the reading and try to focus on being as positive as possible. Thank you, Daryl, for the question. As positive as possible in that particular experience. And I think it was Sam Dodson who originally came up with the term the Keene Spiritual Retreat. I don't know if you feel the same way about Valley Street in Manchester when you checked in there, Damo, but for me, one of the reasons to move to Keene, New Hampshire is the fact that the jail there is better than the average jail. The guy who operates the jail is Rick Van Wickler. He's a member of Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. Maybe some of you have heard of Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. Great group of former police officers and retired cops who have come out against prohibition. So to have a jail run by a guy who works for that organization, I think that's a pretty good indicator that this isn't your average jail. You got actually guards in the jail who are wearing Law Enforcement Against Prohibition pins to show their support for ending the war on drugs. They actually use some real eggs in the kitchen. I know I worked several hours in the kitchen, so I know the food isn't as, it's not like Joe Arpaio's jail out in Arizona where this guy brags about how he spends, 37 cents on a meal. I think the average meal cost in Cheshire County House of Corrections is $2. So they spend more on putting together a better, I think, set of food. That doesn't mean it's going to be 5-star, but it means it's not going to be slop in most instances. So, picking a place, if you're going to do civil disobedience, if you're planning something like, because non-cooperation, it just comes up. It comes up, the opportunity happens, and you choose hopefully to do the right thing. But, when you're picking a place to do civil disobedience, pick the one where the jail is more comfortable. I mean, it worked for me.
I'm wondering if any of you, and maybe Ademo, you could speak to this, particularly about Cop Block, is if someone's planning on getting active in activism, civil disobedience in their hometown, is there a way that, or would you recommend that we should make ourselves known to the cops ahead of time to say, hey, I'm who I am, and I'm planning on having a lot of interaction with you, just to let you know I'm going to be filming you a lot, you might see us around town, anything like that, or for activism in general?
Yeah, I mean, that would probably be a good idea if you would avoid or help lessen the aspect of where an officer overreacts to you initially and stuff like that. And that's why we were just actually having a brainstorm this morning about that, where like the Cop Block gear or the Peaceful Streets Project gear comes in handy, because even if you're by yourself in your hometown, but you're wearing a Cop Block hoodie and you're filming, the cop sees that, and then maybe they do, maybe they don't know about Cop Block or anything else, but they see a cop on the logo, they see the camera, and then they're like, okay, well, this guy just isn't filming me randomly. Is there one of them? Is there 5 of them? Is there 1,000 of them? But to go back to the original question, I think it would be a good tactic, again, to maybe send them an email, send them some sort of certified letter that you could later, if they do overreact in your first few encounters filming them, that you could point to. And so it would be a good point to be thorough and might alleviate the aspect of, who is this guy? What's going on? Put the camera down. They know maybe not just to talk trash to you like that, because like some of the other panelists have mentioned, once these officers or law enforcement folks run into somebody who actually knows their rights, the best example I've gotten on video of that is in Edgewater, New Jersey, when Pete Ayer and I were doing Liberty on Tour. This motorcycle cop was trying to clear a parking lot where a bunch of like sporty cars and crotch rockets hung out, and it was private property. But anyways, I was just filming him doing this, and he'd just drive through and squawk his sirens and flash his lights and just to get people to disperse. And so I'm filming him, and he puts his bike on the kickstand and walks over, and he's like, give me your license and registration. I'm like, I'm not driving a car. And he's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm filming a public official. Why are you doing that? I'm like, because I can. I'm like, am I legally required to answer any of your questions? And like about 3 questions in, he was on the bull rush and stomping his feet and puffing out his chest, and like he realized that I'm not answering his questions, but asking him questions, and that at one point he goes, what are you, a lawyer? And I'm like, I'm just filming a public official. And so he realized, and then his chest goes back in, his stomps stop happening, and he like starts to U-turn because the camera's there. I'm decked out in this gear. There's a bunch of other people around as well in a very public space. And so, had I been like, oh, well, here's my ID, I'm sorry, put the camera down. Okay, I'll put the camera down, and then he might even said, well, I'm arresting you now because I'm going to teach all these other people a lesson that are watching. But the camera, maybe my gear, maybe my questions, the mixture of it all is what alleviated that. So,
apologies if you've already covered this. I had trouble hearing everything from the very back, but in terms of like war tax resistance, for instance, like withholding the military percentage of federal income tax, would you say that that's a viable option, or just like going to cause the IRS to make your life a living hell?
I recommend paying 0% federal income tax. Who the hell do these people think they are? They don't own me, and I'm not going to live my life like they do. Are they going to hurt me? Maybe. I'm coming up on 10 years of not paying them. And I talk about it openly, obviously, so I can't. in any good conscience, give money to an organization who is killing innocent people all around the world and jailing countless humans. I plan on opting out of a portion of local property taxes soon as well for the same reason. I no longer can live with them putting my friends who have not harmed anyone else, and people I don't know, because the jails everywhere are filled with innocent people who've never hurt anybody else. I just can't abide that anymore. I think that that's a real act of civil disobedience that I think can be very powerful, especially if you combine together with others who are of the same belief system, which of course is what we're doing here in New Hampshire as part of the Free State Project. And to the other gentleman, I would just add, if you're planning on doing civil disobedience in your hometown, please have people to back you up, have someone else, 2-3 people there with video cameras. I'd be scared to death to do it in Sarasota, Florida. Those cops scare me. The jail is not a place I want to spend time, but New Hampshire police seem to be a little bit easier going in my experience. And I'm sorry, I've kind of gone off your
It's
question.
fine. I'm just wondering, how do you go about not paying taxes? Like, is it as easy as just not filing?
You just don't do anything.
No way. Thank you.
Yeah, if you leave a paper trail for them to, like paying part of your taxes, that's a red flag for them, and they're going to just come after you. Of course, you can write that letter, to state, if you really do want them to know what you're doing, to state it. But you're waving the red flag out in front of the bull.
I don't do anything at all, but that doesn't mean that I don't get these forms. Like sometimes the business I work with, they have to send this W-9 or something in to get someone to just cut us a check, just to pay us for advertising. So sometimes there's paperwork that probably gets sent to them, but not directly from me.
Yeah, well, I've gotten the phone call where they, this is us, we're the big government. Don't you feel that you need to pay taxes? And I just said no. And they don't have any questions after that.
How many years, Jim, has it been? For me, it's 9.
2005.
Fantastic. Anybody else here not paying, if you want to admit it? Okay, so the whole panel. Yeah. How about the audience? How many are not paying taxes in the audience? Federal taxes, not paying federal taxes. Fantastic. Now maybe next year we can have half the audience, which would be great. Sir, go ahead.
Thank you. Sorry I got here a bit late. I really wanted to hear the whole panel and the whole time. Anyway, I've been working to help a couple of inmates in the Concord State Prison, and I've learned that there's a lot that goes on that's wrong within the prison system that affects inmates adversely. And inmates are people too. My question to you is this: what can I do or anyone do to help civil disobedience actions within the prison?
I've long thought of ways to get things in prison, because being in jails, I've long thought I'm very alone in there, and so one of the questions to go back just one step was about the worst things, and another one of the things I'd like to add is the amount of ridiculous rules. One example, before lunch, when they bring the cart in, they lock everybody in their rooms. What do they think? We're a bunch of animals. We're just going to raid the cart and do whatever. Or, if you leave the unit and go down the hall to the medical office that they make you do, and then you come back, you haven't left the secure facility, but it's another pat down, and they can, if they desire, or if the cop wants to do his job thoroughly, strip search. You never even left the secure facility, so for me, it was really hard not to at sometimes bite my tongue for that, because then you end up back in the hole, or they take your commissary. They take your visits, and a number of ways. So for me, I was trying to get folks to send me books. Whenever there's an activist in jail, use them as an outlet to the other inmates. So I got 40 or 50 books when I was in there, and I read them, hand them out, get them around. Mail to jail that Ian had mentioned before, and helping with folks' commissaries, but. The difficult aspect of that is how controlled the jail is as far as getting anything into it. There's a great essay at copblock.org by Larkin Rose, When Should You Shoot a Cop? It's just a question, and that was censored from my mail. His book was censored from my mail. Other books that Daniel D'Amico had sent me were censored from my mail. Cop block poster or little business cards with basic, not even the glossy high ink. So it's very difficult. One place to look is, what's Lance Weber's thing? Prison Legal News. Prison Legal News does some stuff, and so they can get a lot of information in there, and maybe helping them or working with them in some way could help. I don't know if anyone else has any suggestions.
I think we're going to have to cut it short and take our next two questions, and that'll be it because we're running out of time. Sir.
I was just wondering about backlash from the native New Hampshire people who might not believe as us, employers, things like that, to your actions, because we all have families to take care of. I was wondering, if there's a particular area, if you were going to move to New Hampshire, that's better for this. I don't want to be in a city. I hate cities. I'm more of a rural guy. So Keene is not probably something I would consider, but just your thoughts on that.
What was the question? The question was, where would be the best places for this in New Hampshire?
I don't know. Everything seems to be the same everywhere. I mean, you get in a smaller town, they're going to handle it more on a private basis. There's going to be more people who will shun you in the local community. In a larger community, people won't know you as much, or there'll be more people who believe like you. So, the more people there are around, probably the more help you're going to get.
I think that Cheshire County is a really good place. It doesn't matter if you're in Keene. As long as you're in Cheshire County, you'll end up in the Cheshire County Spiritual Retreat or the Keene Spiritual Retreat, which, compared to the stories I've heard about Manchester's Valley Street, it's like night and day in comparison. And you've spent time in both places. Adama, would you say that's a somewhat accurate comparison?
It's definitely, very night and day. I mean, older facility is Valley Street, new facility, Cheshire County, the warden is less heavy-handed. People die in Valley Street. I did 92 days there, and 3 people, in my opinion, were killed. They say it's suicide, but anywho. But yeah, definitely night and day difference.
Yeah, so to me, that if you're doing civil disobedience, that's one of the most important factors to consider. Pam?
I want to thank you all for not paying the taxes, because I see that as the only way we're going to bring down the government. If they don't have our money, they can't do their wars, they can't do that Obamacare and all this. But my question is, how the blazes do you not pay? I mean, I'm a teacher. Are you all self-employed or something? Okay, and I wanted to ask you about how do you get away from not paying property taxes?
Well, I haven't started that yet, but maybe there's someone else on the panel who I plan on doing that in the near future, and I will pay a portion of it because it's the only way to support building roads and things, but I don't support the school system and I don't support other things that they do. But is there anyone here who wants to comment on that question?
Well, we did try not paying property taxes for a while, but they were going to turn off our water, so we decided, might as well get back in the good graces of the city.
Do you think they would have done it differently had you paid a portion instead of 0%? Or were you paying a portion?
Well, in our city, if you don't pay a portion, they just charge you interest on the part you haven't paid. So.
Right, but would they have cut your water off, do you think, had you been paying 30% or something?
I don't know. I don't know.
Maybe we'll find out. Daryl has a comment.
Yeah, so to answer Pam's question about people that have day jobs and don't want to fund the government wars, there's a neat little trick that you can do when you fill out your W-4. Down in, I believe it's line 7, write the word exempt, and then they do not take out federal income tax. They still take out the Medicare and Socialist Security, but they don't take out the income tax that makes the income not taxable. So then you generally get whatever amount they steal from you of Medicare and Social Security back. So it still requires you to file, just write exempt. I've been doing it for several years.
Can you amend those forms once you've already filled it? I filled it out 15 years ago.
Yeah. So we are just about out of time. There's a couple things I want to add for anybody who just came in. Please go see Rich Paul after you're done with Porcupine Freedom Festival. He'd love to see you. He's in the Keene Spiritual Retreat, a.k.a. the Cheshire House of Corrections. You can go see him for up to a half an hour, and he's available from 9 to noon, from 1 to 2:30, and from 6 to 9, which, by the way, is another comparison to Valley Street Jail in Manchester. In Valley Street, you can only visit somebody for a 2-hour window once per week, on one particular day. So you can go 2 people at a time max. At Cheshire, you can have a whole group of people in the room to visit. So if a bunch of you are there at once, 4 or 5 of you can go in and visit him at one time, and you can go 7 days a week. So it's like night and day between these two jails. I want to say thank you for coming and listening to us today. I really appreciate it. If you want to ask us more questions, you guys mill about for a little bit, and the audience will be out there maybe having some food. And so feel free to come on up and ask any other questions you might have. And when you get a chance to drop by the registration booth, you've probably already been there, you'll see there's a table of free information. We've got the Keenvention coming up in November, and a lot of these very same people will be attending the Keenvention. That's November 1st through the 3rd. It's going to be the first one. I don't expect it's going to be anywhere near as large as PorcFest, but it's going to be a hotel-style event where we'll have more panel discussions and great speeches, and you'll get the chance to explore Keene. Maybe we'll go visit the Keene Spiritual Retreat and have a big group visit of Rich Paul or something like that. Do some Robin Hooding, and again, thanks so much for coming to PorcFest. Who, by the way, here is for the first time at PorcFest. Just love to see this. That's absolutely incredible. Thank you for doing this and being here with us today.
Is liberty dying where you live? Escape to Keene at freekeene.com.